The stage rattled into Gila Bend, Arizona territory on a January morning so cold that frost clung to the wooden buildings like lace. And Tessa Kincaid stepped down onto frozen ground with nothing but a carpetbag, $17, and a heart still trying to mend from loss. She stood in the dusty street, her thin coat doing little against the biting wind that swept down from the distant mountains, watching the stage pull away in a cloud of pale dust. The driver had looked at her with pity when she told him she had no return fare, no family waiting, nowhere specific to go. But Tessa had learned that pity changed nothing. She had buried her parents back in Missouri 3 months ago, watched the bank take their farm, and decided that staying meant drowning in memories that would pull her under like stones tied to her ankles. So she had come west with the last of the money from selling what little the bank had not claimed, chasing the slim hope that a new territory meant new chances. The advertisement had promised opportunities for seamstresses and laundresses in the growing towns of Arizona. What it had not mentioned was that January in the desert could freeze a person straight through, or that most establishments wanted references she did not have, or that $17 would not last long enough to matter. Gila Bend looked like it had been built by people too stubborn to admit the desert did not want them there. The main street stretched out before her with a general store, a saloon, a modest church, a few other businesses she could not quite make out through the cold haze, and scattered houses that seemed to huddle together against the vast emptiness surrounding them. In the distance, strange rock formations rose like ancient sentinels, and beyond them, mountains that looked purple in the winter light. Tessa picked up her carpetbag and walked toward the general store, her boots crunching on the frozen ground. She needed information more than anything else. Where could a woman find work? Was there a boarding house? How long could $17 keep her fed? The store was warm inside, heated by a pot-bellied stove that radiated blessed heat. A woman behind the counter looked up from her ledger, taking in Tessa's worn clothes and wind-chapped face with a glance that missed nothing. "Help you?" the woman asked, not unkindly. "I am looking for work," Tessa said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I can sew, clean, cook reasonably well. I am a hard worker and I learn quickly." The woman's expression softened slightly. "You just arrived on the stage. Family here. No family anywhere," Tessa said, and saying it aloud made it feel more real, more final. "Just myself." The woman was quiet for a moment, studying her. "Name is Helen Pritchard. My husband and I run this store. Truth is, there is not much call for hired help in a town this size. Most families do their own work. The saloon hires girls, but I do not think that is what you are looking for." Tessa felt something sink in her chest. "Is there a boarding house? Mrs. Chen runs one 2 streets over, but she will want payment up front, and it is not cheap." Helen paused. "There might be one option, though I cannot say if it will suit. Man named Matthias Edwards has a ranch about 5 miles north of town. He came in yesterday looking to hire someone for household help. His place is decent-sized, runs cattle and some horses. He is a fair man, but he lives alone out there. It would mean staying at the ranch." "I do not mind hard work or isolation," Tessa said quickly. "If he is looking for help, I would be grateful for the chance to speak with him." Helen nodded slowly. "He usually comes into town for supplies on Thursdays, but that is 2 days away. Though," she glanced toward the window, "if you are willing to walk out there, you could try your luck today. The road north is easy enough to follow. 5 miles in this cold with just her thin coat and worn boots. But what choice did she have? 2 days meant 2 days of paying for a room she could not afford, 2 days of eating into the little money she had. And what if someone else took the position before she could speak to him? "Could you point me in the right direction?" Tessa asked, Helen came around the counter, concern creasing her forehead. "Girl, it is bitter cold out there. At least wait until afternoon when it warms up some. Have you eaten?" "I will manage," Tessa said, though her stomach was tight with hunger. She had eaten yesterday morning, saved money by skipping supper. "Wait here." Helen disappeared into a back room and returned with a thick shawl and a bundle wrapped in cloth. "The shawl you can borrow. Bring it back when you are in town next. This is bread and cheese. You cannot walk 5 miles in this weather on an empty stomach." Tessa felt tears prick her eyes at this unexpected kindness. "I do not know how to thank you. Thank me by being careful. The road is safe enough, but you watch for ice. Matthias Edwards's place is the only ranch on that road. You will see the fence line long before you reach the house. Big gate with an M carved into the crossbeam. You cannot miss it." Helen wrapped the shawl around Tessa's shoulders. "He is a good man, just lonely. Lost his wife years back. Does not talk much, but he is decent." Tessa tucked the food into her carpet bag and headed back out into the cold. The shawl helped considerably, and knowing she had food waiting made the journey seem less daunting. She followed Helen's directions north, leaving the small cluster of buildings behind as the road stretched out into open country. The landscape was unlike anything she had known in Missouri. Everything seemed bigger here, more exposed. The sky stretched endlessly overhead, a pale blue that looked almost white in the winter light. The strange desert plants were foreign to her, their shapes stark against the frozen ground. In the distance, she could see dust devils spinning in small circles, and birds she could not name circled overhead. She walked steadily, stopping once to eat half the bread and cheese, grateful for Helen's generosity. The road was indeed easy to follow, cutting a clear path through the scrubland. Her feet began to ache from the cold and the distance, but she kept moving. Turning back would mean admitting defeat before she had even tried. It was past noon when she finally saw the fence line Helen had mentioned. Well-maintained posts and wire stretched out in both directions, and ahead she could see the gate with its carved M. Beyond it, the road continued to a cluster of buildings in the distance. A house, a barn, what looked like a stable, and several other structures she could not identify from here. Tessa pushed open the gate, making sure to close it carefully behind her, and walked up the long drive. As she got closer, she could see that the ranch was well kept. The buildings looked solid and maintained, the corrals were sturdy, and even in winter there was an air of order about the place. Horses stood in one of the corrals, their breath creating small clouds in the cold air. She was nearly to the house when she saw him. A man emerged from the barn leading a horse, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in work clothes and a heavy coat. He stopped when he saw her, clearly surprised to find a stranger walking up his drive. Matthias Edwards had the look of a man shaped by hard work and harder losses. His face was weathered but not old, somewhere in his early 30s she guessed, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that were cautious but not unkind. He tied the horse to a post and walked toward her, moving with the easy confidence of a man on his own land. "Help you?" He called out when he was close enough. Tessa stopped, suddenly aware of how she must look. Travel-worn, half-frozen, appearing on his property without warning. She straightened her shoulders and met his eyes. "My name is Tessa Kincaid, Mrs. Pritchard at the general store told me you were looking to hire household help. I am here to apply for the position." He looked at her in silence for a long moment, taking in her carpet bag, the borrowed shawl, the determination in her stance despite the obvious cold and exhaustion. "You walked from town?" "Yes, sir." "In this weather?" "I needed to speak with you before someone else took the position." Something flickered in his eyes, respect maybe or surprise. "Come inside before you freeze. We can talk where it is warm." The house was simple but well built. One large main room that served as kitchen and living area, with doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. A fire burned in the stone fireplace, and the warmth was so welcome it almost hurt. Matthias gestured to a chair at the solid wooden table. "Sit. I will make coffee." Tessa sat, setting her carpetbag on the floor beside her, watching as he moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency. He clearly knew his way around basic tasks, but she could see signs everywhere that this was a house without a woman's touch. Dishes stacked haphazardly, dust on surfaces that should have been clean, mending piled in a basket that looked like it had been waiting months for attention. He set 2 cups of coffee on the table and sat across from her. The coffee was strong and hot, and Tessa wrapped her cold hands around the cup gratefully. "Tell me about yourself," he said, his voice deep and measured. Tessa had prepared for this question during the long walk. "I am 22 years old. I grew up on a farm in Missouri. My parents passed 3 months ago and there was nothing left to keep me there. I came west looking for work. I can cook, clean, so tend a garden, preserve food, and manage a household. I'm not afraid of hard work and I do not give up easily. No family at all, none living. References?" She met his eyes steadily. "None. I have no one to vouch for me except myself, but if you give me a chance, I will prove my worth." He was quiet, studying her over the rim of his coffee cup. The work would be cooking, cleaning, laundry, mending, general household tasks. "I am out working the ranch most days from dawn until dark. I need someone who can manage things without constant supervision. Room and board provided, plus $20 a month. You would have your own room and I expect proper behavior. This is a respectable household." $20 a month plus room and board. It was more than fair, more than she had hoped for. Tessa felt hope kindle in her chest. "That sounds very reasonable." "Why did you really come west?" Matthias asked suddenly. "Young woman alone, no family, no references." "There is more to it than just your parents passing." Tessa considered lying, making up something that sounded better, but those steady eyes seemed like they would see through any deception. "After they died, the bank took the farm. I had nothing left, no prospects, no future there. Everyone I knew looked at me with pity, and I could not bear it. I needed to go somewhere no one knew me, somewhere I could build something new. The advertisement said there were opportunities in Arizona territory, so I used what little money I had to come here. I arrived this morning with $17 to my name and nowhere to stay. Mrs. Pritchard was kind enough to tell me about this position. I am not running from anything shameful, just from a life that ended and could not be rebuilt in the same place." The honesty hung in the air between them. Matthias was quiet for so long she thought she had made a mistake, revealed too much vulnerability. Then he nodded slowly. "I lost my wife 4 years ago," he said, his voice careful, as if the words still carried weight. "Fever took her in the summer. Since then, I have been managing on my own, but the truth is I am better with cattle than I am with keeping house. Place is falling apart around me in small ways. I need help and you need work, but I want to be clear about expectations. This is employment, nothing more. I am hiring you to manage my household and I will treat you with respect. I expect the same in return." "Of course," Tessa said quickly. "I am looking for honest work, nothing more." He stood, walking to the window to look out at his land. "You can start today if you want. I will show you to your room, give you time to settle. Tomorrow we can go over the household accounts and what needs doing. Trial period of 1 month. If it does not work out for either of us, I will pay you for the time worked and give you enough to get established elsewhere. Fair?" "More than fair." Tessa stood as well. "Thank you, Mr. Edwards. I will not disappoint you. Call me Matthias. No need for formality when we are living under the same roof." He picked up her carpet bag before she could reach for it. "Come on, I will show you around." Her room was small but clean, with a real bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. It was more than she had expected, infinitely better than a crowded boarding house or sleeping in the cold. Matthias set her bag on the bed. "I will give you time to settle in. Kitchen is stocked reasonably well. Make whatever you like for supper. I am not particular, just hungry by the end of the day." He paused at the door. "Welcome to the ranch, Tessa." After he left, Tessa sat on the bed and let herself feel the full weight of relief. She had a job, a room, safety. It was more than she had dared hope for when she stepped off that stage this morning. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 spare dresses in the small wardrobe, setting out her hairbrush and the few personal items she owned. The photograph of her parents went on the dresser, their faces looking back at her with love that transcended death. Then she rolled up her sleeves and went to explore the kitchen properly. She found flour, cornmeal, dried beans, salt pork, canned goods, potatoes, onions. Enough to make a decent meal. The pantry was disorganized but well stocked. This was a man who bought supplies in bulk but had no system for storing them. She spent the afternoon cleaning the kitchen, organizing the pantry, scrubbing surfaces until they gleamed. It felt good to work, to have purpose again. She made biscuits, fried salt pork and potatoes, opened a jar of preserved tomatoes she found in the pantry. Simple food but hot and filling. Matthias came in at dusk, stamping snow from his boots at the door. He stopped when he saw the table set, food waiting, the kitchen transformed. "You did not have to do all this today," he said. "I wanted to earn my keep," Tessa replied, setting plates on the table. "Besides, I needed to learn where everything is." They sat and ate in silence at first, the awkwardness of strangers sharing a meal. But Matthias ate with clear appreciation, and that gave Tessa satisfaction. She had forgotten how good it felt to cook for someone who was truly hungry. "This is fine cooking," he said finally. "Better than anything I have managed in months. It is just simple food. Simple done well beats fancy done poorly." He took another biscuit. "How was the walk from town?" "Cold but manageable. The landscape is so different from Missouri. Everything is bigger, more open." "You will get used to it. Desert takes some adjusting, but it grows on you." He was quiet for a moment. "I should tell you, since you will be living here, I run about 200 head of cattle and 20 horses. I have one ranch hand, Miguel, who has his own place about a mile east. He comes most days to help with the work. Good man. His wife Rosa might stop by sometimes. They are good people." "It will be nice to have neighbors," Tessa said, "closest thing to neighbors out here." Matthias stood, carrying his plate to the wash basin. "I will handle the morning feeding before breakfast. Usually eat around 6. That work for you, of course." "Good." He hesitated, then added, "You did well today, Tessa, thank you." After he retreated to his own room, Tessa cleaned up the supper dishes, banked the fire, and sat for a moment in the quiet house. Outside, the winter wind howled across the desert, but inside it was warm and safe. She thought about how different this morning had been, standing cold and uncertain in Gila Bend with no idea what would happen next. Sometimes hope was enough to carry you through. Sometimes someone gave you a chance when you needed it most. She went to bed that night in a real bed, under warm blankets, with a full stomach and honest work waiting in the morning. It was more than enough. The days developed into a rhythm. Tessa rose before dawn to start breakfast, have coffee ready when Matthias came in from the early feeding. They ate together in comfortable silence. Then he would head out to work the ranch while she tackled the endless household tasks. The house had been neglected for so long that everything needed attention. She washed windows, scrubbed floors, organized closets, mended everything in that overflowing basket, and then started on Matthias's clothes that were held together more by hope than thread. Miguel proved to be exactly as advertised, a steady man in his 40s with kind eyes and calloused hands. His wife Rosa came by on the third day, bringing fresh eggs and warm friendship. She was a comfortable woman with laugh lines around her eyes and an easy manner that put Tessa at ease immediately. "It is good to see this house cared for again," Rosa said, looking around the clean kitchen with approval. "Matthias is a good man, but he was letting everything fall apart. Too sad to care, I think." "He loved his wife very much," Tessa asked quietly. "Very much. Catherine was her name. Sweet woman, kind heart. When she died, something in him died too. He just works now from dawn to dark, like if he stops moving he will have to feel things." Rosa patted Tessa's hand. "But already I see small changes. He is remembering how to live in a home instead of just a house." Tessa was not sure she could take credit for that, but she appreciated Rosa's kindness. The older woman became a regular visitor, stopping by twice a week to share news, bring supplies from town, and provide the kind of easy companionship that Tessa had not realized she was missing. 2 weeks into her employment, a winter storm rolled in that turned the world white. Snow fell thick and fast, transforming the desert into something from a dream. Matthias came in from checking on the cattle, covered in snow, his face red from the cold. "Storm is going to be bad," he said, shaking snow from his coat. "Might last a few days. We are well stocked, so no need to worry. Just might get a bit of cabin fever before it is through." Tessa made hot soup and coffee while the wind howled outside. They ate together, the warmth of the fire pushing back against the storm's fury. After supper, Matthias did something unexpected. Instead of retreating to his room as he usually did, he pulled a chair near the fire and began working on a piece of leather tack that needed repair. Tessa brought her mending to the other chair, and they worked in companionable silence. The storm raged outside, but inside it was warm and peaceful. After a while, Matthias started talking, small things at first. Stories about the ranch, about learning the land, about the challenges of raising cattle in the desert. Tessa listened, occasionally sharing stories of her own, memories of Missouri that no longer hurt quite so much to recall. "Why cattle?" she asked at one point. "Why here?" "Came out here 10 years ago," Matthias said, his hands steady on the leather. "Wanted to build something, prove I could make it on my own terms. Found this land, saw potential where others saw hardship. Met Catherine in Tucson, brought her here as my wife. We built this place together, every fence post, every building. Had plans for a family, for growing old together." He was quiet for a moment. "Then she was gone, and all those plans went with her. But the ranch remained, and I suppose I stayed because leaving would mean admitting it was all for nothing." "It is not for nothing," Tessa said softly. "You built something lasting. That matters." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something passed between them, understanding maybe. The recognition of shared loss and the determination to keep going despite it. The storm lasted 3 days, and during that time something shifted. They talked more, shared more. Tessa learned about Matthias's family back in Texas, about the brother he had not seen in years, about his father who thought ranching in Arizona was foolishness. Matthias learned about Tessa's childhood, about her mother's garden and her father's terrible singing voice, about the small joys and large sorrows that had shaped her life. When the storm finally broke and the world emerged white and gleaming, Matthias rode out to check on the cattle while Tessa made bread. She found herself watching from the window, tracking his progress across the snow-covered land, feeling a strange flutter in her chest when he rode back into view. It was concern for her employer, she told herself. Natural to worry about someone riding out in dangerous conditions. Nothing more than that. But she was lying to herself, and she knew it. February came with slightly warmer days and the slow retreat of winter. The desert began to show signs of life, subtle greens pushing through the ground, birds returning from wherever they spent the coldest months. Matthias hired extra hands for the spring branding, and the ranch was suddenly busy with activity. Tessa found herself cooking for 6 men instead of 2, rising even earlier to prepare large breakfasts and pack lunches, making hearty suppers for hungry workers. It was exhausting work, but she thrived on it. The men were respectful, clearly warned by Matthias to mind their manners, and they appreciated good food and clean accommodations. One evening, after the hands had eaten and gone to the bunkhouse, Matthias stayed to help her clean up. It was not necessary, but she appreciated the company. "You have done remarkable work," he said, drying dishes while she washed. "The men have commented that they have never eaten better on any ranch, and the house, everything is better than it has been in years." "I am glad to be useful," Tessa said. "You are more than useful. You have brought life back to this place." He set down the dish towel and turned to face her. "Your trial month ended a week ago. I should have said something then. I want you to stay, Tessa, for as long as you are willing." "I want to stay too," she said, and realized she meant it completely. This ranch, this desert, this life had become home in a way she had not expected. "Good." He smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. "That is very good." Spring brought a different kind of work. The cattle were moved to new grazing land. Repairs were made to fences and buildings damaged by winter weather. The garden plot behind the house was prepared for planting. Rosa brought seedlings and seeds, teaching Tessa which plants thrived in the desert soil, how to manage water carefully, how to coax life from earth that seemed determined to remain barren. Tessa worked in the garden in the early mornings and late evenings, finding peace in the simple act of tending growing things. Matthias often found excuses to be nearby, repairing a fence that did not really need repairing, checking on horses that were perfectly fine. They talked while they worked, conversations that ranged from practical matters to deeper things. "You miss Missouri?" he asked one evening as she watered the young plants. "I miss what it was," Tessa said. "The farm as it was when my parents were alive, the life we had. But that is gone, and going back would not bring it back. This," she gestured to the garden, the ranch beyond, "this is my life now, and I am content with it." "Just content?" Matthias asked, something in his voice that made her look up. Their eyes met, and Tessa felt her heart skip. He was looking at her the way a man looks at a woman he is beginning to care for, not just an employee. She saw the moment he realized what his expression had revealed, saw him start to retreat behind the careful walls he had built. "Matthias," she said softly, stopping him, "I am more than content." He took a step closer. "Tessa, I did not hire you with any expectations beyond honest work. I want you to know that. But somewhere along the way, things changed for me. You are not just my housekeeper. You are the first thing I think about in the morning and the last thing on my mind at night. You have brought warmth and light back into my life, and I do not want to lose that. I do not want to lose you." Tessa set down the watering can, her hands trembling slightly. "You are not going to lose me. I am not going anywhere." "I am saying this badly," he continued. "What I mean is, my feelings have become more than they should be for an employer. And if that makes you uncomfortable, I will never mention it again. We can continue exactly as we have been, but I needed you to know." She crossed the small distance between them, close enough to see the hope and fear warring in his eyes. "What if my feelings have changed too? What if I look forward to breakfast because it means seeing you? What if I find excuses to be near you, to hear your voice? What then? Matthias reached out slowly, giving her time to step away if she wanted. When she did not move, he cupped her face gently in his rough hands. Then I would ask if I could court you properly. Take you into town for church socials, sit with you in the evenings, see if what we both feel can grow into something more. I think it already has grown into something more, Tessa whispered. He kissed her then, soft and careful, a question and a promise. Tessa leaned into the kiss, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart beating fast beneath her palms. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. I should have asked first, Matthias said. I am glad you did not. I might have talked myself out of letting you. They stood in the garden as the sun set, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber, and talked about what this meant. They agreed to take things slowly, to be mindful of proprieties even as their feelings deepened. Rosa could chaperone when needed, and they would be open about their courtship so there would be no gossip or questions about impropriety. The summer months were sweet in a way Tessa had never experienced. Matthias courted her with a quiet intensity that took her breath away. He brought her wildflowers from the desert, taught her to ride so they could explore the ranch together, sat with her in the evenings reading aloud from books they both enjoyed. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's thoughts and dreams. In late July, they attended a dance in Gila Bend. Tessa wore her best dress, and Matthias looked almost uncomfortable in his good suit, but his eyes when he looked at her held such warmth that she felt beautiful beyond measure. They danced together, Matthias surprisingly graceful for such a large man, and the whole town could see that the lonely rancher and his housekeeper had found something rare and worth celebrating. People are talking, Tessa murmured as they swayed to the music. Let them talk, Matthias replied. I have nothing to hide. I love you, Tessa Kincaid, and I do not care who knows it. It was the first time he had said the words aloud, and Tessa felt tears prick her eyes. I love you too, Matthias Edwards, so very much. That night, as they rode back to the ranch under a sky full of stars, Matthias stopped the wagon on a rise that overlooked his land. The ranch spread out below them, the buildings dark shapes in the moonlight, peaceful and solid. I want to ask you something, Matthias said, taking her hand. But I want you to feel free to say no if it is too soon or not what you want. Tessa's heart began to pound. Ask me. Marry me, Tessa, not because you work for me or because it is convenient. Marry me because you love me and want to build a life together. Marry me because when I imagine my future, you are in every part of it. Marry me because you have become essential to my happiness, and I want to be essential to yours. Tessa turned to face him fully, seeing the vulnerability in his expression, the hope and fear mixed together. This man who had given her a chance when she had nothing, who had offered her safety and respect, and then slowly, carefully, his heart. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I will marry you. They were married in late August in the small church in Gila Bend. Rosa stood up with Tessa, and Miguel stood with Matthias. Helen Pritchard was there, beaming with pride as if she had orchestrated the whole thing. Half the town came, curious to see the wedding and celebrate with two people who had found happiness against the odds. Tessa wore a new dress, cream-colored with lace at the collar that Rosa had helped her make. Matthias wore his suit and looked at her like she was the most precious thing he had ever seen. When they exchanged vows, his voice was steady and sure, and hers was clear and strong. They meant every word. The ranch became truly theirs together. No longer employer and employee, but partners in every sense. They worked side by side, building and improving, planning for the future. Matthias taught Tessa everything about running the ranch, valuing her opinions and ideas. Tessa brought order and efficiency to operations that had been managed haphazardly for too long. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. A drought in the fall tested their water resources and forced difficult decisions about the herd. Tessa fell ill in the winter with a fever that frightened them both, reminding Matthias too much of how he had lost Catherine. But they faced everything together, supporting each other through the hard times and celebrating the good. In the spring, Tessa discovered she was pregnant. She told Matthias one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, still a favorite ritual even after months of marriage. "I have news," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat belly. "We are going to have a child." Matthias went very still, his eyes searching hers. "Truly, truly. Rosa thinks October, maybe early November." He pulled her close, holding her carefully as if she might break. She felt moisture on his cheek and realized he was crying. "I thought I would never have this," he whispered. "After Catherine, I thought this part of my life was over. And now, with you, I have everything I thought I had lost. A wife I love, a child coming, a future worth living for." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Rosa hovered like a mother hen, making sure Tessa did not overwork, bringing special foods and teas meant to ensure a healthy baby. Matthias treated Tessa like she was made of glass, which amused her to no end. "I am pregnant, not broken," she told him one day when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "I know, but I cannot help worrying. You and this baby are everything to me." Their son was born in early November during a week of unseasonably warm weather. The birth was long and difficult, attended by Rosa and a doctor from Tucson who happened to be visiting Gila Bend. Matthias wore a path in the floorboards of the main room, pacing and praying until finally, blessedly, he heard the cry of a newborn. Rosa emerged with a smile. "You have a son, strong and healthy, and Tessa is tired but well." Matthias rushed in to find Tessa exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle. She looked up at him with such love and pride that he felt his throat tighten. "Meet your son," she said softly. The baby was perfect. Tiny and red-faced, with a surprising amount of dark hair and lungs that clearly worked fine. Matthias took him carefully, awed by the weight of this new life in his arms. "What should we call him?" Tessa asked. They had discussed names but never decided. Now, looking at his son, Matthias knew. "Thomas, after your father, Thomas Michael Edwards." Tessa's eyes filled with tears. "He would have been so proud." Thomas was a good baby, healthy and strong. He grew quickly, thriving in the desert air. Tessa proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving, and Matthias was utterly devoted to his son. They took turns walking the floor during fussy nights, shared the joy of first smiles and small milestones. The ranch continued to prosper. Matthias expanded the herd gradually, making smart decisions about breeding and sales. They added on to the house, creating a proper nursery and an extra room for the future. Because they both wanted more children, wanted to fill their home with life and love. When Thomas was 2, Tessa became pregnant again. This time she was less nervous, more confident in her body's ability to carry and deliver a child. Their daughter arrived in the spring, an easier birth than Thomas had been, much to everyone's relief. They named her Catherine Rose, after Matthias's first wife and in honor of Rosa, who had become like family. It felt right to Tessa, honoring the woman who had come before her, acknowledging that Matthias's capacity to love her did not diminish what he had felt for Catherine. Love was not finite. It grew and expanded to encompass all who deserved it. Little Catherine had her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes, and she ruled the household from the moment she arrived. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, learning gentleness as he held her tiny hand. The years unfolded like pages in a beloved book. Thomas grew tall and strong, learning to ride before he was 5, following his father around the ranch with devoted attention. Catherine was fearless and spirited, climbing things she should not climb, exploring every corner of the ranch with boundless curiosity. When she was 3, another son arrived, James, calm and observant from the start. Tessa sometimes looked around at her life and marveled at how completely it had changed. She thought about that frightened girl who had stepped off the stage in Gila Bend with nothing but hope and $17. She thought about walking 5 miles in the bitter cold to ask for a job from a man she had never met. Every choice, every moment of courage had led to this. The ranch was successful now, well known for quality cattle and horses. They had built a reputation for fair dealing and good stock. Miguel had become more than a ranch hand, a partner in many ways, and his children and Tessa's played together like cousins. Rosa remained a constant presence, her friendship one of Tessa's greatest treasures. Matthias thrived in ways he had not thought possible. The grief and loneliness that had defined him for so long had been transformed by love and family. He still missed Catherine sometimes, still honored her memory, but he had learned that moving forward did not mean forgetting. It meant creating space for new joy while holding old love carefully in your heart. On a particularly beautiful evening in late spring, when Thomas was 8 and Catherine 5 and James just 2, the family sat on the porch watching the sunset. It had become their tradition, this quiet time together at the end of the day. The children played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. Tessa leaned against Matthias, his arm around her shoulders, feeling peaceful and complete. "You ever regret it?" Matthias asked quietly. "Stepping off that stage with nothing, taking such a risk?" Tessa thought about it seriously. "No, I think somehow I knew that staying meant dying inside even if I was still breathing. Coming here, meeting you, building this life, it saved me in every way a person can be saved." "Do you regret hiring a desperate stranger who showed up at your door?" "Best decision I ever made," Matthias said, kissing the top of her head. "You gave me back my life, Tessa. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," she corrected gently. As the sun painted the desert in shades of amber and gold, as their children played and laughed, as the ranch settled into evening quiet, Tessa felt a deep and abiding gratitude. For second chances and new beginnings. For a lonely cowboy who had been willing to take a risk on hope. For love that had grown slowly and surely until it filled every corner of their lives. She had arrived in winter with nothing but hope, and he had given her everything else. But in truth, they had saved each other. Two broken people who had found wholeness in each other's arms, who had built something beautiful out of loss and loneliness. The years continued to be kind. Thomas grew into a fine young man, taking on more responsibility at the ranch, showing his father's steady nature and his mother's determination. Catherine remained spirited and bright, with a gift for horses that impressed even the most experienced hands. James was quiet but observant, with a mind that worked through problems with careful logic. When Tessa was 35, she gave birth to their last child, another daughter they named Grace. She was a surprise, coming when they thought their family was complete, but she was welcomed with joy and delight. Thomas was 13 and initially embarrassed to have a baby sister, but Grace won him over with her sunny disposition. Catherine and James doted on her, playing with her for hours. Matthias turned 40 that year, still strong and vital, though silver was beginning to thread through his dark hair. He and Tessa had been married for over a decade, and their love had only deepened with time. They still took evening walks when they could, still talked late into the night about dreams and plans, still looked at each other with the wonder of people who know they are blessed beyond measure. The ranch had grown to nearly 500 head of cattle and a thriving horse breeding operation. They employed several full-time hands now and had built additional housing to accommodate them. The main house had been expanded twice, creating space for their growing family. The garden that Tessa had started in those early days had become extensive, providing vegetables and herbs for their table and extra to sell in town. Gila Bend had grown too, evolving from a rough frontier town into an established community. The church had a new building. There was a proper school that Thomas and Catherine attended, and new businesses had opened. Helen Pritchard had passed away a few years back, but her husband still ran the general store, and he always greeted Tessa with warmth and stories about how Helen had been so proud to have helped her that first day. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Matthias took Tessa into Tucson for a few days, leaving the children in Rosa's capable care. It was the first time they had been away from the ranch together since their wedding, and it felt like a grand adventure. They stayed in a nice hotel, ate in restaurants, walked through the growing city hand in hand. 15 years, Tessa said as they sat in the hotel dining room. It seems impossible that it has been so long, and yet I cannot imagine life without you. I was thinking the same thing, Matthias said, reaching across the table to take her hand. You know what I remember most about that first day? How you stood in my yard, clearly exhausted and cold, but your chin was up and your eyes were determined. You were not asking for charity. You were offering fair exchange, work for wages. I respected that immediately. I remember being terrified you would say no, Tessa admitted. I had no backup plan, nowhere else to go. You were my last hope. I am glad I was your last hope. I am glad you walked 5 miles in the cold. I am glad for every choice that led you to me. He raised her hand to his lips. Here is to 15 more years and 15 after that, and however many we are blessed to have together. They returned to the ranch refreshed and happy, greeted by children who had missed them terribly and a house that had survived their absence but definitely needed their parents back. Life settled into its comfortable rhythms again. Thomas turned 18 in the fall, officially becoming a man. He had grown tall and broad-shouldered like his father, with Tessa's green eyes and a quiet competence that made everyone who worked with him respect his abilities. Matthias began turning over more of the ranch operations to him, teaching him the business side as well as the practical work. He is a natural, Matthias told Tessa one evening. Better at some things than I ever was. He has your head for numbers and organization. He has your integrity and work ethic, Tessa replied. Together, those things will serve him well. Catherine, at 15, was becoming a beautiful young woman, though she still preferred working with horses to anything else. She had a gift for breaking and training them, a patience and intuition that could not be taught. Several neighboring ranchers had asked to buy horses she had trained, and she was building her own small reputation. James at 12 was quieter but no less capable. He spent hours reading when he could, and had developed an interest in the business of ranching. He kept meticulous records of the herd, tracking bloodlines and breeding with a precision that impressed his father. He talked about maybe studying law someday, being a person who could help ranchers navigate the increasingly complex regulations and disputes that arose. Grace at 5 was the baby of the family and knew it. Bright and charming, she wrapped everyone around her little finger, especially her father. She followed her mother everywhere, wanting to help with cooking and gardening, chattering constantly about everything she saw and thought. The family remained close to Rosa and Miguel, their friendship spanning decades now. Miguel's children were grown and starting families of their own, and Rosa delighted in being grandmother to an expanding number of little ones. She and Tessa would sit together on lazy afternoons, watching children play, marveling at how time had passed. "You remember when you first came?" Rosa asked one such afternoon. "So thin and serious, trying so hard to prove yourself." "I was terrified," Tessa admitted. "Terrified I would fail, terrified I would have to leave, terrified of being alone again. And look at you now. A ranch that prospers, a husband who adores you, beautiful children, a place in the community. You have built something remarkable." "We built it," Tessa corrected. "Matthias and I together. And with the help of friends like you and Miguel. I could not have done any of this alone." As the 20th anniversary of Tessa's arrival in Gila Bend approached, the family planned a celebration. Thomas was now 22 and engaged to a sweet girl from town named Margaret. Catherine was 19 and courting a young rancher's son, though she had made it clear she was in no hurry to marry. James was 16 and already working part-time at a law office in Tucson while keeping up with his schooling. Grace was 9 and showing signs of becoming a teacher, endlessly patient with younger children and eager to share what she knew. Matthias was 45 and still ran the ranch alongside Thomas, though he was gradually shifting more responsibility to his son. The silver in his hair had spread, and there were deeper lines around his eyes, but he was healthy and strong. He and Tessa had settled into a comfortable partnership that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger. Tessa was 42 now, her dark hair touched with gray at the temples, her face showing the marks of time and sun and laughter. She was content in a way she had never imagined possible during those dark days after her parents' death. The fear and uncertainty of her youth seemed like another lifetime, another person's story. The celebration was held at the ranch on a perfect autumn day. Friends and neighbors gathered. Tables were laden with food. Children ran laughing through the yard. Miguel gave a speech about how he had watched Tessa transform not just the ranch but Matthias himself, bringing life and love back to a man who had been slowly dying inside. Rosa cried happy tears and hugged everyone. Helen's husband presented Tessa with the shawl she had borrowed that first day, cleaned and carefully preserved. "She wanted you to have this," he said. "Told me before she passed that if that girl with nothing but hope could build the life she built, that shawl deserved to be hers properly." Tessa held the shawl carefully, remembering that bitter cold day, the kindness of a stranger, the terrifying walk to an uncertain future. She thought about the girl she had been, and the woman she had become, about how much courage it had taken to step into the unknown, and how richly that courage had been rewarded. As the sun set and their guests began to leave, Matthias found Tessa standing at the fence, looking out over the land they had built together. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her close. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she replied, leaning back against his solid warmth. 20 years ago I stood in town with $17 and no idea what would happen next. I was so scared, Matthias. But I was determined to try, to hope, to believe something better was possible. I am grateful every day that you were brave enough to try, that you walked up my drive and asked for a chance, that you stayed and let me fall in love with you. Everything good in my life flows from that day." They stood together in the gathering dusk, watching the desert transform in the fading light. From the house came the sounds of their children cleaning up after the party, their voices carrying on the warm breeze. The cattle were settled for the night, the horses peaceful in their corrals. Everything was as it should be. "You think the children understand how lucky they are?" Tessa asked. "To have this life, this stability, this love? Maybe not yet. But they will when they are older and have faced the world themselves. They will look back and understand what we built for them." Matthias turned her to face him. But it was not just for them. It was for us too, two people who had lost everything and found each other, who built a life worth living together. Thomas called from the house that Grace wanted her mother, and Tessa smiled. Duty calls. Always, Matthias agreed, but he kissed her before letting her go, a reminder that even after all these years, the love between them remained strong and true. The seasons continued their endless cycle. Thomas married Margaret in a beautiful ceremony, and within a year they presented Matthias and Tessa with their first grandchild, a boy they named Matthias after his grandfather. Holding his tiny grandson, Matthias felt the circle of life complete itself in the most beautiful way. Catherine eventually married her rancher's son when she was 23, but only after he agreed that she would continue her work with horses and have equal say in their ranch operations. She was not a woman to be diminished, and she had learned from watching her parents that marriage should be a true partnership. James did indeed study law, graduating from a university in California and returning to Arizona to practice. He became an advocate for ranchers and farmers, using his knowledge to protect people who worked the land. He never forgot where he came from or the values his parents had instilled. Grace became a teacher, just as they had predicted, working in the school in Gila Bend and bringing the same patient intelligence to her students that she had shown her siblings as a child. She married a banker named William, and they had a daughter who looked exactly like Tessa. As Matthias and Tessa grew older, they gradually turned the ranch operations entirely over to Thomas and his family. They moved into a smaller house on the property, built specifically for them, with a wide porch and a view of the mountains. The main house belonged to the next generation now, filled with the sounds of grandchildren and the constant activity of a working ranch. Matthias's health began to decline when he was in his mid-60s. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down of a body that had worked hard for many years. He took it with characteristic stoicism, grateful for the time he had and philosophical about the time that was ending. Tessa stayed by his side, their roles reversed from that long-ago fever when she had been ill and he had nursed her. On a warm spring evening when the desert was in full bloom and the air was sweet with the scent of flowering plants, Matthias and Tessa sat on their porch watching the sunset. It was their ritual still, after more than 30 years of marriage. His breathing was labored now, and she knew their time was growing short, but he was peaceful content. "You remember," he said softly, "that night I asked you to marry me, under the stars looking out over the ranch." "I remember every detail," Tessa said, holding his hand carefully. "How nervous you were, how beautiful the stars looked, how my heart felt like it might burst with happiness. I did not dare hope for happiness like this. A lifetime with you, children who make me proud, grandchildren to carry on what we built. It has been a good life, Tessa." "Better than I deserved." "You deserved every bit of it," she said fiercely. "You are a good man, Matthias Edwards. You gave a desperate girl a chance when you did not have to. You treated me with respect and kindness. You loved me completely. You built this family with me, this legacy. You deserve all the happiness we found together." He smiled at her, the smile she had fallen in love with all those years ago. "I love you, Tessa, from that first day until my last breath and beyond. You are my greatest gift, my truest blessing." "I love you too," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Always and forever." He died peacefully 3 days later, surrounded by his family, in the house on the land he had loved, with Tessa holding his hand. They buried him on a rise overlooking the ranch, where he could watch over everything he had built. Thomas carved a beautiful headstone that read, "Matthias Edwards, beloved husband, father, grandfather. He gave everything love required." Tessa grieved, but she did not break. She had learned long ago that love does not end with death, it simply changes form. Matthias lived on in their children, in the ranch they had built together, in the life they had shared. She felt his presence in the evening sunsets, heard his voice in the wind across the desert, saw his face in their grandchildren. She lived another 15 years, long enough to see all her children happily settled, to meet great-grandchildren, to know that everything she and Matthias had built would endure. She remained sharp and engaged, helping run the ranch in an advisory capacity, teaching her grandchildren to garden, telling stories of the old days that became family legend. When her time came, she went peacefully in her sleep, a gentle transition from one world to the next. They buried her beside Matthias, and her headstone read, Tessa Kincaid Edwards, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother. She arrived with hope and built a legacy of love. The ranch continued under Thomas's capable management, passed down through the generations just as Matthias and Tessa had hoped. The story of how their great-great-grandmother had arrived in winter with nothing but hope, and how their great-great-grandfather had given her everything else, became a cherished family tale. It was told to children and grandchildren, a reminder of courage and kindness, of how love can transform lives, of how two broken people had found wholeness together. The desert remained unchanged, vast and beautiful and unforgiving to those who did not respect it. But on that ranch north of Gila Bend, where a lonely cowboy had once taken a chance on a desperate girl, love had created something eternal. Buildings might age and people might die, but the love Matthias and Tessa had shared, the family they had created, the legacy they had built together that endured. Years turned to decades, decades to generations. The ranch adapted to changing times but never lost sight of its foundation. The values Matthias and Tessa had instilled, partnership and hard work and treating people with respect, remained central to how the family operated. New buildings replaced old ones, modern equipment supplemented traditional methods, but the spirit of the place remained unchanged. Visitors to the ranch would sometimes pause at the graves on the rise, reading the headstones and asking about the couple buried there. The current generation would smile and tell the story, how Tessa had stepped off a stage in the bitter winter of 1885 with nothing but hope and $17, how she had walked 5 miles to ask for work, how Matthias had given her a chance that transformed both their lives. They would talk about the love that had grown between them, steady and true, a love that had weathered hardship and celebrated joy, that had created a family and built a legacy. They would point out the original house, still standing though now used for storage, and the garden plot that had been expanded over the years but still grew in the same spot where Tessa had first coaxed life from the desert soil. The story always ended the same way, with the reminder that courage and hope, combined with kindness and love, could create something beautiful beyond measure. That taking a chance on someone could change not just their life but generations to come. That love, real and true and committed, was the foundation upon which everything worthwhile was built. And on clear desert evenings, when the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and gold, when the wind whispered across the land and the mountains turned purple in the distance, it was easy to imagine Matthias and Tessa still there somehow, still watching over the ranch they had built together, still celebrating the love that had saved them both. She had arrived in winter with nothing but hope. He had given her everything else. And together, they had created a legacy that would endure as long as the desert itself, a testament to the transformative power of love and the courage to believe in second chances.